obviously our Microsoft community sponsors. So we have Docs42, Experlogics, and Dynamics Consultants Group. They're a Microsoft Gold partner, and without them, this event really wouldn't be possible. So definitely thank you to them. Even though this event is online, it still takes the community and sponsors to make these events big and successful. So thank you. So my name is Josh Cook again, and I'm Power Platform Principal Architect here. I do have a slide in a couple slides here, kind of more of them about me, but so today at the Intergalactic Automation Bootcamp, I will be talking about Power Automate and the power of child flows. So the reason why I chose this topic is because talking with a bunch of people and even within my own organization, I've found that not many people actually are utilizing child flows, probably more, not as much as they should be. I do see a lot of people getting into like some errors or limitations when they're just not really aware of child flows. So I believe child flows will help everyone in this chat, anybody who's actually joined today. I guarantee you'll learn at least one thing, and hopefully you're able to implement these best practices and these processes or these diagrams really to your own automations and to your own solutions. So that, again, power of child flows. And just to go over a little bit about me. So again, I'm a Power Platform Principal Architect. I work at K Microtech. It's a US company. I'm actually based in Canada, so I work fully remotely. I'm a Microsoft MVP in business applications. I'm a Power Automate super user, a Power Virtual Agent super user. I'm a father of 3. This is kind of new. So I do have a 3-year-old, and me and my wife decided to have more kids for some reason. And twins do not run in our family, but we got twins. So, and they're all boys. So it's going to be a very hectic household, and I'm finding it hard to have any free time to do a lot of different things. But it's been good, and I don't really, I don't wish anything else. I'm happy with my family and everything. It's just a little chaotic at times, and I'm sure anyone that has kids understands. And another thing is I actually have ADHD as well. So if this conversation goes a little bit off topic, that's probably why, but I'll do my best to stay on topic. And then I'm actually into a lot of this is how I got into the space actually is blockchain and crypto. So I'm not like, I don't have a bunch of crypto or anything like that, but blockchain and crypto is kind of where I started in this technology space. And it's kind of put in my brain that you can kind of learn anything, even if it's new, because at the time blockchain was very new when I was learning it, and it just goes to show that if you have passion and you can, if you have passion towards something, then you can achieve basically anything. So, and I have a QR code there, and I will have it at the end of my slides as well. Basically, just showcasing. It'll have my Linktree link, so it'll have my Twitter, LinkedIn. Connect with me in any platform you like, any platform that you have. And if you have any questions, reach out as well. And I will be taking questions at the end of this session as well. So going over today's agenda. So today's agenda is going to be what are child flows? We're going to go over the prerequisites. Obviously, we're going to need some, there's not very many. When to use child flows, because this is the big one that I've seen that not many people are kind of utilizing when they should be. And this is a big one, the limitations. So we want to make sure that we understand all the limitations, the current limitations, kind of how to get past them. And we just don't want to be thinking about or building something if it's going to if it's going to I guess have a conflict with one of the limitations. So understanding all the limitations and everything beforehand is obviously a good thing to know. Then we're going to go over a demo. If we have time, I'll do 2 demos, but I do have I allocated time for 1 demo. Hopefully we have time for 2 because the second one's pretty cool, but we'll see. And then we'll go over the best practices and kind of how I've been utilizing child flows and how I've been implementing them. Okay, and then we'll do Q&A at the very end. And if there are, I think nobody can talk or chat right now anyway, but if there are crazy questions or something crazy is happening, just let me know. So first topic here is, so what are child flows? I'm sure most of you can kind of guess. I don't know if everyone here has used them before, but basically, it's an action inside of Flow or Power Automate that we can call. You might not see it if you don't use solutions. It's one of the prerequisites, which we'll get to after. But it'll contain two parts really for these child flows to work. So it's going to contain the parent flow, which in this case is going to be the trigger, and it can be any trigger. It can be an automated trigger, scheduled trigger, button trigger. It doesn't really matter. You can trigger it from a Power App, you can trigger it from a form, whatever. And then we have a child flow. Now the child flow, you can have many child flows. You can have one, you can have two. It doesn't really matter. But these have to have a button trigger. So that regular old manual button trigger, that's actually the trigger we need for the child flow. And after I implement the child flow, I don't really call it a button trigger anymore because it's technically not. It's kind of a, I guess, automated trigger, really, because you can't really trigger it by itself. You can, but not from, kind of have the limitations, not really from the mobile app or anything like that. But you're able to trigger it off of any flow that you have, any flow that you have that's inside of a solution, you'll be able to trigger this child flow as well. So reusability is a big thing here. And then just other things to note is that cloud flows, they do trigger other flows. That's kind of the child relationship there. They do pass data back as well. And again, it allows for that reusability with the parent-child model or grandchild, whatever you want. If you have multiple levels deep, you can go as far down as you want. I believe, I think it's, yeah, you can go far down as you want. And then you can pass the values back and forth. So if you need a value, if you have a main flow and then you're triggering a child flow, you can actually get data or a response or parameters back from that child flow into the parent flow again. And then you can use that data even to call additional child flows or do just the regular processing that you would. So the fun part, prerequisites. So again, we do need a Dataverse enabled environment because we're using solutions. So any environment that has a Dataverse enabled will work. The big thing that a lot of organizations actually block, and this is kind of the one big prerequisite here, is that little icon there, the HTTP action. So the HTTP action needs to be allowed in the DLP policy. Now, the reason for that is because for some reason, Microsoft, they actually added the child flow action. It's kind of like bundled in underneath the HTTP action or trigger. It's not really the same thing, but it's bundled in for some reason. And I think Microsoft is trying to remove that dependency, obviously, because some organizations like to block that HTTP connector, but doing so, they blocked child flows as well, which is very sad to see, to be honest. And one thing that I hear everybody say is because we talked about HTTP trigger, which is a premium connection. You actually do not need a premium license to use child flows if you use them the correct way, because you technically can call a child flow from a HTTP trigger, but again, that's premium. We're going to use the flow action that's going to allow us to call child flows and everything without the need of premium licensing. So that is the prerequisites there. And yeah, so let's get, big thing here, when to use child flows. So again, child flows might not be the best option for every single scenario or use case, but for a lot of scenarios and use cases that I see happening, some of the main ones actually could benefit greatly by using child flows. And we'll go over that here. So, and I actually wrote a blog post on this, and I'll showcase it after quickly, just skim through it. But basically, using a predefined connection inside of a Power App. So here's the heading from my blog. So basically, in this example, I want to write data to a SharePoint list, but I do not want everybody in the Power App that is using the Power App to write to that SharePoint site. Maybe I want them, maybe it's confidential, maybe it's a COVID screening app or something where nobody should really see the data. They should just be able to submit data. By default in SharePoint, you could kind of configure the permissions to do that, but again, the Power App's going to kind of need access to that list if they're writing any data to it. A way around this would be to use the child flow. So in the example here, the Power App is getting triggered, and it's basically calling a child flow with the data that I'm passing in through a variable. And the child flow is what actually is creating the item inside of SharePoint. And by doing this, I'm actually able to set an embedded connection. So it's not actually using the user who's in the app. It's not using their connection. It's actually using a predefined like service principal or service account connection that I've defined. So no matter what, whoever's in the Power App and triggers this flow, it'll always use that embedded connection, which by default in Power Apps is not possible. Just that it'll always use the Power Apps connection if that data source is connected to the Power App, which is yeah, a huge, not an issue, but it's it's a use case that I see a lot, especially on the community forums where people are trying to do things in the Power App, triggering the Power Automate flow, and then running into issues because it's using the connection of the person who's logged in. And secondly, we can reuse flows. So I know you heard me say this last slide, but any flow that gets triggered, like lots, or maybe it's a heavy lifting flow, maybe even multiple teams or departments could use this flow, excuse me, but they could use it for like downstream processing or data entry, again, with the embedded connection. So you're able to reuse different flows within that. Again, you have to make sure that the departments or the teams are kind of same kind of process, but as long as you set up the parameters correctly, if it's like writing to a data source or something that maybe not everyone has access to, then providing just the fields that they need to provide is would work really well. And this is actually really cool, and this is one I'll look at if we have time. But basically a central logger. So when we can actually create a flow that we can basically pass around the whole organization, where if their flow, if they create a flow in a solution or whatever and it fails, they can actually call this central logger flow only when the flow fails, and then it'll basically you can create a like a run log. So then if the flow fails, you'll be notified when the flow fails by having it sent to a SharePoint list or Dataverse or SQL or something. And you're able to put in like the URL maybe of the flow run, the name of the flow, what time, and you can even get really creative and even put like the error message. Obviously that requires a little bit more work, but again, you only have to do it once. And once you do it, then you can have that child flow basically be called by any other flow. And then another thing is that we can cut down on heavy lifting flows. Now, I've actually never ran into this issue, but I've actually heard people run into this issue right here, where you've actually used too many actions in flow or Power Automate. Basically, the limit's like 500. So if you have 500 and over 500 actions in your flow, you're going to receive this message. Now, if you have 500 actions in your flow, that flow probably takes like 5 minutes to even open. I feel sorry for you, and I hope that you're able to use, if anybody sees this issue, I hope you're able to use child flows in a way where it'll help you troubleshooting as well. Because again, if it takes 5 minutes to open the flow, just imagine trying to troubleshoot that, right? Especially with like if you have like a bunch of runs they need to go through and find like the data that maybe is either mismatched or something happened within one of the actions, and you have to go through every single run. It's not going to be very fun. It's going to be very time consuming, and it's going to be redundant. So and then state machine workflows. This is a big one. I see a lot, especially if you're coming from like a SharePoint workflow for state machine into a like Power Automate or flow, even if you're doing a migration. Basically state machine. This is where like the status is, like an item gets created in SharePoint and has a status field, and the status field has multiple different statuses for different, either for different groups or for different tasks. For example, it could be an approval state machine where I submit a document, the document gets has to go through the first approval gate, and then once it's approved there, it goes to the other team, and the status of that item keeps changing depending on which stage it's at. Now, that's fine, and I see I think Power Automate even has a template for this called State Machine, but If your processes are very big within the different branching of statuses, like if, for example, if the status is approved or ready to be approved, and you have to do like 10 different things or 20 different things in there, it might be better to create a child flow for that. That way, it's easier to troubleshoot. You're able to go in and find the run easier, and it's also easier to develop as well. Because now, if there's a issue with one of the branches, you don't have to reconfigure the whole flow and retest everything. You can kind of just re-edit or fix the one flow, and then the main flow, like the parent one, will just run fine. So you don't have to retest everything. You'll just have to retest the one flow that you edited. Then this is going to be one of the examples, not super in depth, but the state machine workflow is the one we're going to look at in our demo. And yeah, so now we're going to go over to the limitations. So limitations here, again, they may differ on the time of you're watching this, or even they might even help or switch later, and you'll see why. So the data loss prevention DLP, that is an issue. It's kind of a bug, really, where if you don't have HTTP enabled or allowed inside of your DLP, you're not able to actually use child flows, and that is it's a limitation, really, because not every organization is going to allow HTTP in the non-business group. So that is a limitation we need to be aware of. And then this is a huge one. You must create the flows inside of a solution. You cannot use the add existing. You cannot add an existing flow to a solution and utilize child flows. You actually have to create it from scratch, which is very annoying, actually. But you have to create it from scratch inside of the solution. Now, I did have a workaround, but for some reason, they must have made an update, and today it does not work. So the workaround that I have does not work anymore. I can go over it if we have time, but basically, yeah, if you have a flow that you want to convert to using child flows right now, you have to recreate it, and it's sad, really. So flows, this is another limitation, is flows triggered from like Microsoft 365 applications. That includes like, Excel, or when a file is selected. I believe that's one too from SharePoint. Those are actually not available inside of solutions, which means it's a limitation on our cloud or our child flows. That's another thing that I noticed, that there's two different limitations. There's the solution limitations, and then there's the child flow limitations. Child flow limitations really are the only thing is that the data loss prevention, and then the other two that we see right here are from the solutions and the solution limitations. Same with this one too. So like flows in solutions don't support delegated authentication. What that means is that if the flow is connected to a SharePoint list, the users will still need access to, or the users do not need access to that list. Again, it's using an embedded connection. So users will not have access to that list, meaning if you need that item to say that it's been updated by a certain person or created by a certain person, then child flows will not work for this, because again, it's going to use an embedded connection. I'll showcase that in a second, but just be aware of that, because if we use a service connection and we're updating items, creating items in SharePoint or Dataverse, it's going to say that it's created by or modified by whatever connection that we selected as the embedded connection. So going off of that, I believe it is, we can go to the next slide here. So finally, it's demo time. So I'm going to just switch screens here, and then we'll do a demo. And for this, I actually have to, the way my monitors are set up, I actually have to unshare and share again. So I will be sharing my other screen here. And Let me just find it. Okay, so basically I have I'll go in the flow first. So this is basically what it would look like if you have if your flow has already been created, right? So this is kind of like the state machine, like I was saying. So I have a content schedule here I'm connected to, and this is how you would normally do it, right? So you have a planned when if the status is equal to planned, assigned, blah blah blah. And again, this is very simple, where I'm only updating the item to assigned. But again, it can be an approval, it can be anything, right? It can be steps that they have to complete, and then each branch here might be different, right? And might be talking or sending data to different people. Maybe it's doing different things. But for this example, and for some reason I can't scroll, I need to get it up full screen. So, but for example, I just have the 5 here, and if I look into the SharePoint list here, this is called content schedule. So I just have 3 here, just created a couple just randomly. But the goal here is people connect or people create or an item gets created in here with a certain status, and then depending on that status, different things happen in the flow here. And again, this is not utilizing child flows, and this is not created inside of a solution. And then I'll have to actually kind of recreate it, just to showcase though why this is not a best practice by having this flow. So if I go back and I did a little test here, obviously I did a test, one failed. That's easy to find. But if I go back here to my SharePoint list, there's 2 here. One is published. Now, if the flow ran successfully all the way through, at the very end, the status should be published because I'm just updating the status each time, right? So 2 here I noticed are not finished, and they technically should be. There's no more runs. The flow's not running anymore. What happened, right? So the first one I know just from doing it, I know that one of them is from this failed run here. So the failed run, easy to find, but the other one is not from a failed run. I actually have to go in and find what happened to why this one's not, or why the other one's not being pushed to the other statuses. And the hard part is that in the flow here, everything's showing successful. So I actually have to go in, let's see if I go into this one. And again, this flow is going to open really quickly, but imagine if you had like 50 actions or even like 100, or please don't say 500, but if you had a 500, imagine how long this would take to open. And click in each action to figure out, okay, what happened here? Okay, it's updated there. Okay, successful, right? That's done. Okay, and then go out and then go back into the other flow or the other run here. So the second run, what happened here? Okay, open it up. Oh, it's in this one. Okay, looks like that updated properly. All right, so go back. And as you can see, this becomes very time consuming. And again, this is opening really quickly for me because nothing's really happening in this flow. But imagine if there was, right, where it's taking them like 30 seconds, even 20 seconds to open each single run. And there's like 50 runs, right? Now you're kind of screwed, right? So in here, it is saying ready to publish. And if I just confirm, this is the status right here. Now we need to, I guarantee you that probably the next run now, let's see, I go back. And then, so if I go to this one, this is one actually I just had open, I think. So yeah, as you can see, it gets confusing as well. So now we're at the, draft needs approval. Okay, and it did is ready to publish. Okay, so now the very last run, here we go. Find out what happened. So if I open this up, I go over here, I can see I can see, oh, I forgot to turn off static results because I was messing around with static results to showcase that this is always successful because I was testing something, forgot to turn it off, and this is why it's not publishing, because technically it's not actually updating the item to published. So meaning the flow stops and it's not running anymore. And if I open this up, it just says okay. So now I can see that I just need to turn this off and then it'll work. But again, just kind of showcasing how hard it is to troubleshoot a flow that does not have child flows, that are not utilizing child flows. And we can see how of a pain that is, right? So let's recreate this really as a parent-child flow relationship. So as a best practice, they do say to actually build the child flow first. And the reason is because there's some configuration you have to do in the child flow to make it work in the parent flow. And then the child flow is going to have the parameters that you're asking for. So it's easier to build the child flow, but it doesn't have to be built first, but it's just easier. So let's just get going here. So I'm going to go over to, let's get out of here. And I'm going to go into, so again, we need a solution. So click on the solutions tab. And I'm just going to create a new solution, and I'll just call it, let's call it Bootcamp content approval. Okay. And then I'm just going to, it doesn't matter about all this information here. You just need to make sure you have the display name and the name. And then when that's created, now I'm inside of my solution, or this is the solution right here. And I will showcase what my workaround was, where if I, but for some reason it's not working right now, there must be a bug. Again, the feature is in preview, so I can't really complain, but basically I'll showcase that in a second. So automation Cloudflow, I will need to create a new one, right? I cannot add existing. If I add existing, it will not work. Child flows will not be available, and I'll be confused and probably wonder why. So we always go new, and then we go automation Cloudflow, and I'm building the child first. So the child flow must have an instant trigger. So I'm gonna hit instant. And you might want to follow a good naming convention. You know, you can go, I can even go child. Again, this, you don't have to follow my naming convention or anything. Approval. I'll name it approval tasks planning. I'll just copy that name and I'll use it later. So again, button flow, hit create. Now, if I go back, I'll just duplicate this tab and go back and just showcase my workaround that does not work anymore, but it might work later. So I might save you guys some time later. So if I go into that flow that I had, content scheduler. So if I go into edit mode, technically, you know, everything's in here. I could actually basically copy, and if I had a bunch of actions in here, I can actually go like this into hit the control, and I'm actually going to open up a scope. Scopes are pretty cool. You can actually put actions inside of a scope. I can put this inside of a scope. If there was other actions in here, for example, maybe a compose or something. And then again, there could just be a bunch of actions in here. And what I would do is I would actually copy this whole scope, and then you could actually go into the solution, and you could, before, even though it doesn't show up, you could go Control V, but Control V does not work anymore. And I even did a really good test, and I tried to even paste it inside of here, and it does not paste. So I can't paste it. I used to be able to paste it inside of a code editor, but you can't now. Again, this might work later in the future, so it might help because it did work before, but it doesn't work now. So now you actually do have to recreate the flow. So yeah, I just wanted to showcase that. So if I wanted to create, like I said, recreate this, I'm basically going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to do a switch, but I'm not going to do 5 just for the sake of time. I am going to just rename this to planning. And then this is planning. And then just gonna basically, I'll actually need to define my parameters first. So what am I gonna need from the parent flow? So I'll need the item ID because I'm gonna update it. And I believe that's actually all I need from there. If it was different list, if it was different sites, I would need a parameter for that. But for this case, it's the same site, same list, just the item is different. So I'm gonna use a text input here. I'm just gonna put in the input item ID. And then basically, you can actually click these 3 dots and you can make it optional if you want, or you can make it required. By default, it's required. Be aware that some of these values here can't be passed back properly. I like to use text. Here, I'll just open it up. I like to use text and number mainly. Dates work too, but like email is also good for validation. But yes, no, and file and arrays are kind of hard to pass back and forth, but it's still possible. You just have to put it into a string and then parse it out. So yeah, so I have my flow here. So now I'm just gonna basically, oh, actually I need the status too. Actually, I don't need, I'm crazy. I don't need this. I don't need the switch because basically the parent flow is gonna have the switch that calls each child flow. So I actually don't need the switch. So I'm just gonna get the item ID, and then I'm actually going to hit next step, and then just go to let's actually need to update an item in SharePoint. So update item, and then again, if the site was different or we needed to dynamically choose the site, we could, but in this case, just easy, it's just going to be static. And then it's going to be content scheduler, and then the item ID is going to be, oh, as we can see, I messed up over here, right? So item ID is text here, but I actually need it to be a number, because that's just how a SharePoint works. So if I hit here and I hit number, then I can go item ID, and then right here, item ID. This is probably why they tell you to build the child flows first, in case you run into any issues like this. So now I have the item ID there. A title is required, so there we go. I do need to bring in the title as well, because I don't want to change the title each time. So I'm just going to put title, and then this will also fill in here for title. Okay, and then the status value, again, this could be dynamic, but just to the sake of time, I'm just going to put, I'll just name it ready to, or I'll just name it ready to publish. And these, again, I can switch these, but it's not a big deal. I'm just gonna hit save. Before I do anything as well, I am gonna turn off this flow here, the old one, just so it doesn't mess up our stuff. So let's turn it off. Okay. So now that this is saved there, I will need one more thing actually, and that is going to be a response, because a child flow has to respond back to the parent. So the way we do that, we add a next step here, and then we this is where people thought you need a premium license, because before people were using the request action here. This request action, it's not showing as, yeah, it is premium. So we do not need to use the request or the response action. The only reason you would need to use the response action right here is if you're passing the values back to Power Apps and you want to pass it as an array or like a collection. Because by default, you can't, it doesn't like arrays. If you try passing an array back, it has these weird special characters like forward slashes and stuff like that. It makes it very hard to parse. So the only reason why you'd want to use a response, in my opinion, would be to pass arrays either to Power Apps or maybe to another system. But for this, we're actually going to use, I believe I get to it by typing in respond. It's under the Power Apps, I guess it's under the Power Apps connection. And I'm just going to hit respond to Power App or flow, and then I can add an output. So again, I can actually add an output of what is happening, and I can, for example, I can go status, and then the value back. I'm updating the item. I can actually pass back the status value to the parent flow. Now I'm going to hit save. There's still one more thing we need to do for the child flow, and I'll do it right after it saves. And this is the embedded connection. Now, right now, everything looks fine, but if we try to trigger this flow from a parent flow, it'll actually give us an error saying that we need to basically turn off run as users. So if I go back and I just open up the flow, and then in the corner here, run only users, this is only needed if you have a connection reference or any connections inside of the flow. So right here, we do have a connection at SharePoint. We are connecting to SharePoint in the flow. So I will need to edit the run only users. When you click on this, all the connections that you're using in your flow will show up here. You basically need to click this drop down and you can select which connection you want to use, depending on the connection references that you have available in that solution. Best practice would be to use a service principal, but I'm just I'm going to use my own account. So I'm just going to select this. It's going to give me a little option saying users with the run only access will not control or have access to the connection outside of the flow. So it's important to know it's a good security measure here where if I switch this connection to, like, let's say a service principal that has administrative rights, that has a bunch of permissions, I'm not going to have to worry that anybody that has access or that's triggering this flow is not going to be able to use this connection anywhere else. They're only going to have access to it within this flow in the context of what it's doing. They're not going to be able to edit it or anything like that. So I'm going to hit OK. And now that is saved. And just to verify, I'm just going to click on it. So it didn't save for some reason. So I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit OK and hit save. Should save now. All right. So now I'm going to confirm again. Okay, so now it's saying it is going to use that connection. Okay. So now I have my child flow, and again, I would do this for any like all the different branches that I'm going to have inside of the parent. But yeah, sake of time, I'm just going to do one or two maybe. But yeah, so now we're going to build the we're going to build the parent flow. So now I'm just going to hit new again. Remember, we need to have a new flow. So new, and this one, again, it could be automated, and actually it has to be automated in this case, but it can be any of these, right? It can be instant, scheduled, automated. I'm going to do an automated one because I'm going to do when an item is created inside of that SharePoint site. So I'm just going to follow the same naming schema I'm following already, but again, you can create your own or follow mine. So parent, I was put start approval. Sorry, approval process. When an item is created or modified, that's the one I want right there, and then hit create. So now I'm gonna have to link up my site again, and that's Power Platform Demos with Content Scheduler. Okay, so now in here, this is where I want to build out my branching, right? So I have switch right there. And then again, we're doing it off the status. So status value. And then this one is going to be planning, which is technically the first one that happens. And just to CD here. So planning. So next, what are we going to do in planning? We basically want to call that child flow. So how do we do that? We just type in child, or you can type in flows, and it's actually under this thing here. So again, if you cannot see this option right here that says flows, that means your flow is not inside of a solution, or not created inside of a solution. So it means you'd have to recreate it. So run as child flow, and I would actually change the name of this to the flow that we're trying to trigger. So I'm just going to go back to the solution just to get the exact name. So I'm just going to open it, then I have it open as well. So I'll copy that back here, and then just I'll put run. There we go. And then here's where I can select the flow. And one important thing to note is that you don't have to call a flow that's inside of your own solution. You can actually call a flow outside of your solution as long as it's been created inside of a solution. Obviously, be aware of that though, because if you're deploying these things, and that's a dependency, it will show up as a dependency when you're importing into another environment. So just be aware of that this will create a dependency. So as we can see, it's asking me for the item ID and the title, which are those fields that I defined in the child flow. So, and again, they're required fields. So I'm going to pass in the ID, and then for the title, I'm going to pass in the title. That way, it's going to update what we want properly. And then when we come back, we could technically get the value back, but and just do processing within here, because maybe now instead of having instead of after this, now maybe I just want to trigger the next flow, right? Instead of doing a whole conditional or anything like that. But it's changing, it is changing the status, so it's going to always trigger this this trigger up here. So this is the way that we're going to go. And then if I wanted to do the other child flows, I'd have to create another child flow and go inside of basically do it that way. And then again, there could be approvals and everything like that attached to it, and then it'll run that way. So I'm gonna hit save. And oh yeah, so I got to get rid of this. So if I hit save, okay. Now inside of here, now as you can see, we didn't get any errors or anything like that because we did everything correctly. If you did get an error, it's going to be because of the run only users or because you forgot to put in the response action at the very end. So those are the two things you always want to make sure that you have. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So let's trigger this flow and see if it works properly. So I'll hit new item up here and then just go document doc approval. And then planned, it should be a default, but demo. So I'll name it planned and I'll hit save. And then that's going to save it into the list here. I didn't like it because there we go, doc approval. So we can go back to the flow here and see if it's triggered yet. So I'll check the child flow first, or the parent, sorry. And as we can see, because I named everything like this, it makes everything a lot easier to understand what's happening, right? I know that this is the parent flow and this is the child flow. And again, there could be multiple child flows, but it'll be easier to troubleshoot knowing which flow is being triggered, really. So let's go here. It looks like it hasn't been triggered yet. So I'll just wait a minute. While I'm waiting, or actually no, I'll wait. I don't want to confuse everyone. Dun, dun, dun. Again, this all depends on your licensing, I'm pretty sure. So like on when this will run. There we go. So it ran. And if I open up the run here, it'll actually say it's successful, meaning that the flow actually, oh, and it looks like that it went over there. Yes, I screwed up on that. It's planned, that's why. So I'll change that and then rerun it. And this actually brings up a good point that it shows how not easy, but much better it is to troubleshoot. Right now, I'm just editing this flow. I don't have to worry about the parent at all. I just have to worry about I don't have to worry about the child. I just have to worry about the parent in this case because I was passing the wrong value. Easy to find and troubleshoot. So let's hit save there. And then we'll run it again. So I'll just go back to my SharePoint site. I'm just going to delete it and do it again just to be less confusing. New doc approval, and then I'll just do planned again, and then hit save. Okay, so now that that's there, I go back to my flow here. So I'll just wait for this to be triggered again. The suspense is killing me. There it is. So let's see if it ran successfully. It says it ran successfully. Did it run successfully? Yes. So now it went into the planning. The one thing that I wish we could do from here is actually click a button to go to the child flow run. I wish there was a button here. If we not complain, but if we express our ideas enough, then maybe that feature can happen. But that would be a very cool feature because then we do not have to leave anything, right? Because now I have to go back here and I have to click into the child flow. That is the one downfall of it. But again, it's to help troubleshoot, right? So now I can open up this here. We can see that it's ran. So it brought in the values here, item ID and its number, and I basically brought in that in the title. So there's the title, and then the item ID is 7. Excuse me. And then I'm updating it here to ready to publish. And if I needed to, I'm basically passing the status back. You don't have to pass anything back, but you do have to have this action here respond to a Power App or Flow for it to work properly. And again, so this can be used in multiple different use cases. I do have a couple more slides before we over here, so I'll just pull this back up quickly. So I'll just bring this over so I don't have to reshare my screen. So go here. Okay, so yeah, so after the demo, we basically have the best practices. I wish I can play it from here, but I can't. So best practices is always build the inside of a solution. Always build it inside of a solution. If you don't see the call of flow action, that is why it needs to be built inside of a solution. Hopefully that little tip that I showed with the code snippets works again in the future. And that way you can actually literally just copy the actions over from the one flow that's not inside of a solution into the other flow. There is one extra thing you have to do, and that's add the connection references. But if you ever run into this scenario and you want more information, reach out to me. I'll provide it for sure. I'll definitely respond. And then be aware of the solution limitations and the child flow limitations. I will, if anyone's interested in these links or anything like that, let me know and I can provide them as well. Build the child flow first whenever possible. It's not required, but do it when possible. Just helps with the parameters and establishing the different scenarios. And then the naming schema, it's kind of important because you don't want people to be confused about why, like what's triggering what, or what's the parent, what's the child. In my opinion, you're not the only person that's probably going to be supporting this. So if there's more people that are supporting it, guiding them the best way possible is better, just because that way they're not kind of lost, right? Because you don't want them to be lost. And then use service accounts when possible for embedded connections. Not all the time it's going to be required, but it is best practice. That way it's not showing as those items being or updating by Josh Cook. It's going to show items updated by blah, blah, blah automation or service principal, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, those are the best practices there. And remember, I did cover this best practice, but remember, if you cannot see the child flow action, your flow is not built inside of a solution. Remember to add the embedded connections after you add after you create the child flow, if it has any connections in it. If it doesn't have any connections, if you're just doing, if there's no connections at all inside the child flow, you do not need to do the run as setting. But if there is, you need to do it for every single connection. If you add a new connection after the fact or updating it, you need to also do it to that added connection. Always have to do it. It is required. And then another thing is you have to have that response at the very end of your flow, either the respond to Power App or Flow action or the premium response action, but that's only used if you want to pass array values into, I would say, a Power App. That's the only reason why I've used the premium connection, is basically passing in a array value or a collection into Power App. And that's really it. And thank you. So there's my QR code. You can scan it, or you can go to any of those links there, connect with me if you like. And right now, I guess I'll take over the questions. I will go to the next slide for questions, or if you want me to stay here for the QR code. but I'll go to the next slide, and then actually this is the last slide. Yeah, this is the last slide. So yeah, thank you. And
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just go over some questions here, I guess. So I do see a question. Let me see. So I guess from the top here, where does it start? I see some people were answering questions, so that's nice. Thank you. So Ahmed asked if both parent and child flows must be created in the same solution, then does this mean that a central logger flow pattern will not work? So for some reason, the documentation is unclear. It does say that the limitations that they need to be created inside the same solution, but that's actually untrue. You can actually call a child flow from another solution, and that's actually how the central logger pattern would work. You are able to call another flow from a different solution, as long as, again, it has to follow those same requirements where the flow is created inside of the solution, inside of a solution. And then, yeah, I think somebody did say that it would work. Where can I find links to the requirements? Parent must be created. So if I did say they must be created inside the same solution, I do apologize. That's misinformation by me. It does need to be, you can be created inside of any solution. Yeah, and then you show how you selected, can you show how you selected child flow action? So yeah, I can showcase it again. It looks like people were answering pretty good, but I'll showcase it. So basically, to get to child flow, you do need to have flow inside of a solution. Let me just find my screen again. So let's go back to the solution. There we go. So inside the parent, all you do is you just type in flow. And it's right here, flows. And again, if you don't see this option, it's because the flow that you're in, like this parent one that I'm in right now, would not, if this is not inside a solution, I will not see this. And you click that, and then it's right there. Organization believes the lack of possibility to copy scope between flows should be reported to Microsoft as bug. Okay, I do like what you're saying there. Maybe I'll find some time to report it as a bug, because yeah, it's being able to copy actions within flows even across tenants is very handy, right? Like it saves a lot of doing the same stuff over and over and over again. Is it possible to nest more levels of parent-child relations like parent-child-child? Yes, it is. You can again, you can call a child flow, which calls another child flow, which calls another child flow. Again, you just have to make sure that you have those responses, and it might get a little messy if you're doing it that deep, but yeah, it is possible. When you have too many child cloud flows, what sort of performance impact will it have on your view? So it doesn't really have, I would say the impact isn't as great as if you had a flow that had 500 actions in it, right? I would say that a flow that has a bunch of child flows is way more performant than a flow that has, 100 or 150 or even 50 actions in it, just because the more you're able to split it up, the faster actually it would be, in my experience at least. Okay, so I recently did a parent-child parent being entrant from different related entities of contact. Child one keeping common logic. I'll just put this over here so people can see what I'm saying. Right here. Ahmed. Child 1 keep common logic on record, child getting some credentials to send contract to another endpoint. Nice, I like that use case. It's great to see other people using it. Very good, thank you. You refer something that parent and child should be part of the same solution. What do you mean by solution? Please elaborate. So solution meaning, let's see here. So inside of, keep pulling up the wrong thing here. So inside of the Power Apps or Power Automate portal, there is this thing called solutions, meaning basically what that means though is you need to have Dataverse enabled, but it's basically like a folder that houses all of the different artifacts that you're using. For example, inside here, I have those two flows, the two cloud flows, but if I wanted to, I could add chatbots, reports, tables, Dataverse tables, but that's a whole separate thing. But basically it's a thing to house everything in, but it's what Microsoft kind of wants everyone to kind of go on, just because it's easier for the deployments and it allows everything to be stored inside of Dataverse. So all these flows that are inside of a solution, all the connection references, everything is actually stored inside of Dataverse. Very confusing, mind blowing really, but that is kind of what's happening behind the scenes. So that is a solution. Cloud flows are not available outside of solutions. Again, it's a big thing. The requirement is that you need a Dataverse environment with solutions. I think there's probably time for maybe one more question here. One thing I don't like connection references, it always needs a new connection reference, a different type of connector. But is it possible to have a single connection reference throughout the different connector or course? That is a confusing topic, what you're saying, but I do understand what you're saying there. Basically, the connection references, it depends on who's the owner of the connection reference, I'm pretty sure, but I don't really know the answer to that. So hierarchically, how many child flows could you rechain in series? I actually don't know the answer to this, but I know that you can go as deep as you like, I'm pretty sure. But again, it might be very confusing if you continue to do that. And then the last one here, scenario, SharePoint list, Power App standalone app. Use this list to save data. A user with only read access can trigger a flow, and this flow, parent-child flow, passes the data if the child has a connection. Exactly. Yeah. So exactly. So actually, in my blog post here, and I'll just go to it quickly. Actually, I think I have it open in here. This blog post right here. So this blog post here, I'm basically using a child flow to and I'll link it actually, to basically trigger to basically create items inside of a SharePoint list that the user does not have access to. At a high level, that's what's happening. So I'll go back here. So yeah, so thank you. I think I'm out of time now, but yeah, thank you everyone, and glad everyone had great questions, and looking forward to hearing from you all to see how you implement child flows. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. What an important topic that you've covered today for the Power Automate Bootcamp. For those people that are building out the enterprise-wide automations, I think this topic is very, very, very vital, and thank you so much for going so into detail and answering everyone's questions on this particular matter. Josh, could you share your contact details, such as your blog and your social media, so that the community can keep in touch with you, please?
Yep, I'll link it in the chat.
And you can share it in the chat. That'd be great. Thank you, Josh. Fantastic. So it's a great pleasure to have Josh all the way from the USA join us today. So really thank you, Josh, and keep in touch with Josh. He's always posting on highly relevant topics in relation to Power Automate development. So thank you, Josh, once again. Okay, now